All right, guys, so I've been thinking, reflecting, praying on the best way to approach what's going on in Minneapolis with ICE and with the paid protesters and agitators and those who are perpetrating violence and chaos and destruction in that city, disrupting and interfering with ICE. And I'm going to break things down a little bit, but before I do that, let me just say a few things. Firstly, understand this, that just because the media may have the loudest voices, just because the mayor of Minneapolis and the governor of Minnesota are trying to foment and promulgate narratives, does not believe they hold the majority opinion. There are tons of people that the majority of America understands what's happening in Minneapolis. And I lived there for a few years, so I kind of have a decent framework of just the demographics and just the layout of that place. And it really, in many ways, I think Minneapolis is ground zero for what's going on across the entire country. And I also want to say, look, when someone loses their lives, especially needlessly, it's awful. So the two people who lost their lives when they were engaged with ICE, look, I don't want to litigate each scenario and what happened. And it's easy to do that. It's easy to have an opinion and say, well, look, ICE was justified. These people weren't. These people were the provocateurs. ICE was, look, at the end of the day, what happened was a direct result at the phony, fake, manipulated information that the press, the Democrat Party, and the people who hate Trump foment on a daily basis. Because those people, whether they were paid protesters, they could have been paid, I don't know, wouldn't be surprised, because a lot of those people there are paid protesters. Some are there, and it could have been this scenario, because they actually thought they were fighting for something that was just, that they were resisting tyranny, they were resisting fascism, because in many ways they've been victimized by the mainstream press, the Democrat Party, and those who hate Trump. Because at the center of all of this, the center of these mass ICE protests, is a hatred of Donald Trump. And I'm going to talk about not just the hypocrisy, but the lunacy of the hatred and the venom that is constantly fomented at Trump and at his supporters, and now directly related at ICE. So let me break this down a little bit. So firstly, understand that what's going on in Minneapolis is like the quintessential definition of a psyop. And a psyop is a psychological operation, meaning what you're seeing in Minneapolis, what the media, what the Democrats, what the anti-Trump, the Trump derangement syndrome people want you to believe is that ICE, Immigration's Customs and Enforcement, who again is being directed by Trump, are perpetrating violence, they're perpetrating murder, they're perpetrating discrimination, they're perpetrating all sorts of chaos, when the exact opposite is actually going on. Like, I've seen plenty of people who legitimately, and I think they're probably well-meaning people, have completely drunk the Kool-Aid and have completely been manipulated by a fake, phony press, okay? Specifically. For example, let me talk about this. So President Obama, okay? Do you realize he deported like millions of people? Now, again, he wasn't dealing with what Trump is dealing with. Trump is dealing with an invasion. The previous administration knowingly opened up the border and allowed millions of people to flood in. We're talking about like the worst of the worst. This is the truth. Not every single person, but there was a purpose for that. And I'll talk about that more later. But just understand, Trump is dealing with millions of people who've been let in and unleashed here in this country. And that's just the fact. That is the truth. Now, Obama used ICE. He used ICE. And he used ICE for large-scale operations, targeting criminals, targeting workplace raids, and family detentions. Barack Obama used ICE to do this. Now, let me ask you this question. Did the media, did the Democrats, did the far left, did anyone come out and lambast and lampoon Barack Obama or ICE? Guys, that is just the truth. He did that. Joe Biden, the auto pen guy did that. George W. Bush did that. ICE was established in 2003. So every single president after ICE was established used that. Why wasn't ICE abolished during Joe Biden? Why wasn't ICE abolished during Barack Obama? For all these people, and I guarantee you, 99.999% of the people out there protesting, out there who are agitating, out there who are creating violence and chaos would tell you that Barack Obama was the ideal perfect president and represented the marginalized and the minority population, and he loved the least of these, especially the immigrants. I didn't hear a single person who is on social media crazily accusing Trump and ICE of being fascists and Nazis say a word about Barack Obama. That's firstly, that just shows you that is a fact. You can look this up. It's easy to find. Nothing. So if you're, just understand this, guys, be encouraged to know that this is all a psychological operation, meaning to manipulate people's minds into believing a reality that's not actually there. Another way you could describe it is astroturfing. Astroturfing, think about turf on a football field, right? It's not real grass, it's made to look like grass. So what they want you to do in Minneapolis, here's what the media, the Democrats, and the anti-Trumpers want you to think. They want you to think that this is a grassroots movement. This is all based out of a resentment and a frustration with Trump overreaching and ICE overreaching and them doing things that is contradictory to the law, okay? Which is just, it's honestly, guys, it's a mass delusion. What ICE is doing is simply this. They are following their mandate from the Constitution. That's all they're doing. I've said this before, I'll repeat this. When you come into this country illegally, if you come in uninvited, that is a violation of the law. You are committing a crime. United States Code 1325 enumerates that. When you come into this country uninvited, you've committed a crime. Now, you can argue you don't like the law. You can be mad that you don't like the law, but you don't violate the law, and you say you do it because you're doing it in the name of justice. You're doing it because this is what the people should have done in Nazi Germany. I'm doing the exact same thing when people hid Jewish individuals from the Gestapo and from the Nazis. This is what I'm doing by resisting the laws of the land here in this country. It's absurd because if you actually believe that, you'd have done the same thing with Barack Obama and every other president who's used ICE in deportation. So that's the facts, guys. Let me just say this very specifically. What is happening in big cities, specifically in Minneapolis, is this. In Tom Homan, The Borders Are, he explains this perfectly. So you have illegal, violent criminals who ICE is targeting. That is who they're targeting. But anyone who's here illegally is subject for deportation as the law enumerates, okay? So for example, these violent criminals who are here illegally, okay, they are detained at times in jails, okay? They'll get arrested. And what the mayor does, what the city officials do, and I guess the state officials as well, to the extent they have power to do this, they will release these violent criminals back into the public. When ICE specifically wants to do as much damage control as they possibly can. That is just the truth. They will go and try to get the criminals from the jail cells. The cities, the state, they prevent ICE from actually detaining the criminals, the illegal criminals, in those jails. So when they're released, what ICE has to do is now they have to do raids. So they have to go to workplaces. They have to go into homes. And so what happens is these violent illegal aliens, who, if you're here illegally, who are you going to hang out with most likely? You're going to hang out with other people who are probably here illegally. Now these people may be here and trying to, live a fruitful, successful life, but the bottom line is there's collateral. So you have arrests taking place, not just of the violent illegal aliens, but also those who are here as well illegally. And that is ICE's responsibility. This is not just something like this hyperbolic or that is being distributed that's untrue. When ICE makes an arrest of an illegal alien who's committed violent crimes, then they also have to detain anyone else who is here illegally. That's just how the law works. They have to follow the law. They don't get to choose what the law is or how it was written. That's not their responsibility is to execute the laws on the books. Okay? So understand that, guys. So violence against ICE, think about this. Violence against Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement has increased 1,300% in the last few years since Trump took office, I believe. Think about that. Who is committing the crimes legitimately? I want people to think about this logically too. When you're looking at what's happening in Minneapolis, okay? First of all, why Minneapolis? Why does it just feel like Minneapolis is ground zero for such corruption? Weeks before Minneapolis really became in the crosshairs, or got in the crosshairs of the media and our attention, we learned that Tim Walz, the governor, had been orchestrating massive fraud within the Somalian community to the tune of billions of dollars. Okay, he was in the crosshairs of potential DOJ investigations, certainly just like it was very ominous for him. All of a sudden, stuff starts going down with ICE in Minneapolis. Let me ask you this question. How many cities in this country do you think ICE is currently operating in? Let me say tons of cities. So all of a sudden have people descended upon Minneapolis. If you honestly think this is rooted in grassroots, you are sorely mistaken. Again, it's astroturfing, guys. It's meant to create a perception, a narrative that's not actually there. So you have non-governmental organizations, NGOs. You have the United Nations who organize to funnel people into this country, specifically, in this case, in Minneapolis, okay? So you have tons of people in there. It is a cartel type organization globally to dismantle and to disrupt our cities and our states. And Minneapolis, in many ways, is a ground zero. This is not accidental, guys. And so what ICE is doing, what they want you to think is that somehow ICE is violently perpetrating murder and havoc and discrimination when the exact opposite is going on. This is reality. Now, again, if you're someone with common sense, you're someone who can approach something with pragmatism, you're going to understand that in every occupation, every industry, there are going to be people who do things when they shouldn't. ICE is no different. They're made of human beings. Just like restaurants, just like sporting teams, just like education, just like in the entertainment business, you're always going to have people who do things stupidly and do things outside the books. I'm not saying that's what happened in either of those situations, but let me just tell you this. If you honestly think you know exactly how you would respond in a situation as a law enforcement official when you have tons of, because you're not seeing it on the media, you're not seeing it in social media. You are to a certain extent in social media. Nick Sorter, a guy on X, does a great job. Follow him. Nick Sorter does a phenomenal job of exposing what's actually going on in Minneapolis. But what you're seeing is a tiny snippet. And guys, this is exactly what happened in places like Nazi Germany with Goebbels, who was the Nazi propagandist. It would show you a clip of something. This is what's happening in Minneapolis. They will show you a clip. And you can think you know exactly what happened, but you didn't see the preceding 15 to 20 minutes before that happened. You didn't see all of the encounters that happened leading up to that fatal incident. You have no idea. You have no idea. I say this, they have no idea, guys. So again, I'm saying this to encourage you. When you hear people say, I know exactly what happened, here's the video, here's proof, you don't have any idea. You have no idea of actually what happened. And the media will capitalize on that. They will spin the narrative. They will tell you this is what you should believe, and you have no idea the whole time you are being victimized and you are being manipulated as a subject of psychological warfare. It's exact of social engineering. And we're seeing this. I've never seen it to this extent before, guys. What's happening right now in Minneapolis, it's very similar to what happened on January 6th, very similar to what happened when you saw the police shootings back during President Obama and how the media just manipulated people's public opinions to make you feel that the police were actually racist and discriminatory. Guys, I want you, again, to understand this is rooted in manipulation, psychological operation, and the intent is to demoralize people and to feel like you don't have a voice because your voice is the minority. So be encouraged right now, guys. Be encouraged that God is moving in this country. God is using President Trump to bring balance, to bring order to a corrupt system. And the people in Minneapolis, guys, it's like, I'll end with this. It's like you shine a light on the darkness. It says in the Bible, and I'm paraphrasing here, the darkness hates the light. Because when the light shines in the darkness, it exposes what's going on in the darkness. And again, let me just say this, and I will end with this. The moral superiority you see even with people who are saying they're Christians, and they're saying, how dare you support ICE? How dare you support what they're doing? And they have no idea that the actual things they're fomenting and they're stating is rooted in misinformation, rooted in lies, and rooted in a delusion, a mass delusion. Because guys, by saying you hate ICE, by saying what they're doing is discriminatory, is targeted and is exploitive or exploitation, you're parroting a message that is not rooted in reality, in facts, in actual empirical and anecdotal data. That is the truth. So be encouraged, understand that God is moving. In many ways, Minneapolis is ground zero. The light is being shined, and it goes far greater than just ICE issuing deportations and detaining illegal aliens. It goes far more than that. But that's where it's starting, and in many ways, I think this is encouraging, guys. So be blessed, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, bye.